Welcome to Vision of China. In a bold move aimed at retaliating against Western sanctions, Russia's Moscow Arbitration Court has frozen $372 million worth of assets belonging to Bank of New York Mellon and JP Chase. The decision, issued on October 2nd, is intended to defend Russia's financial interests in the face of increasing economic pressure from the West. Is it reasonable for the West to rely on economic sanctions through financial hegemony? And are Russia's counter-sanctions effective? The frozen assets, held in accounts at Citibank and JP Chase's Russian branches, are reportedly linked to Mr. Bank, a subsidiary of Sberbank, Russia's largest financial institution. The court's action claims that Ukraine's central bank unlawfully revoked Mr. Bank's license, preventing Sberbank from having judicial control over its subsidiary and from managing its income. The result, as Russian officials argue, is a severe disruption to the nation's financial interests. The $372 million consists of $121 million held at JP Chase and $251 million at Bank of New York Mellon. Russian prosecutors argue that blocking these funds has crippled Sberbank's ability to oversee and profit from its Ukrainian operations, particularly Mr. Bank, which has long been a strategic asset in Ukraine. This is not the first instance of Russia targeting U.S. entities with asset freezes. In August, a Russian court froze $36 million worth of Goldman Sachs shares in Russian companies, including a substantial stake in retailer Detsky Mir PJSC. This move came after a lawsuit by Otkrity Bank, accusing Goldman Sachs of breaching a swap contract due to Western sanctions on Russia. Russia's aggressive stance in freezing Western assets signals a broader strategy of retaliation amid mounting economic tensions. The decision follows heightened rhetoric from the Kremlin against Western actions involving Russian assets. The U.S. Congress recently passed legislation to transfer confiscated Russian assets for Ukraine's reconstruction, a move met with stark condemnation from Russian officials. Dmitry Peskov, Kremlin spokesman, described the U.S. action as an attack on both state and private property, vowing retaliatory measures. In response, State Duma Speaker Vyacheslav Volodin has warned that Moscow may soon approve legislation enabling the seizure of Western assets in Russia. Such measures would mirror what Russia describes as an expropriation of its property by Western nations. President Vladimir Putin has also signed a decree that allows Russia to use American-owned properties in Russia as compensation for losses sustained due to Western seizures of Russian assets. The economic conflict between Russia and the West extends beyond asset freezes. Despite sanctions, Western banks are still operating in Russia, generating substantial profits. For instance, Raiffeisen Bank, an Austrian institution, saw its profits in Russia triple from 600 million euros in 2021 to 1.8 billion euros last year, paying 464 million euros in taxes to the Kremlin. Western banks have become a significant financial lifeline for Russia, enabling transactions in Western currencies despite sanctions that restrict access to the SWIFT system. The U.S. has leveraged its control over the SWIFT system to impose sanctions and isolate countries like Russia and Iran from the global financial network, demonstrating the power it holds over international transactions. This financial hegemony allows the West to exert unparalleled influence on the global economy, effectively using the SWIFT system as a tool of economic coercion. By denying access to SWIFT, the U.S. and its allies can disrupt a nation's ability to engage in international trade and finance, reinforcing their dominance and maintaining control over the global financial infrastructure. This dominance allows the U.S. to effectively cut off access to critical financial infrastructure, putting significant pressure on targeted nations. Raiffeisen Bank, along with other Western banks, has found itself trapped in Russia as the Kremlin blocks their attempts to exit. The shares of Raiffeisen Bank have been frozen, preventing the withdrawal of 1.5 billion euros in profits. This situation highlights how Russia is effectively extracting profit from Western assets while retaliating against the sanctions imposed by the G7. The tit-for-tat dynamics do not stop at financial measures alone. The Russian Foreign Ministry and other officials have vowed endless legal challenges to any asset seizures carried out by the West. Maria Zakharova, Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, has been explicit in her defiance, stating, "Our motherland is not for sale," and promising that Russia will not cede any of its territorial gains in Ukraine in exchange for the return of frozen assets. Further complicating the situation is Europe's ongoing reliance on Russian natural gas. Despite efforts to diversify energy sources, Russia remains a major supplier of natural gas to Europe, providing over 12 billion cubic meters in Q2 this year through pipelines like Turkstream and the Ukraine Transit Pipeline. EU banks continue to operate in Russia partly to facilitate these transactions, paying for gas in euros, which underscores why cutting ties completely with Russia remains challenging for Europe. This complex financial and geopolitical dispute has profound implications not just for Russia and the US, but also for the broader international financial system. With $300 billion of Russian assets frozen abroad, most of it held in European financial institutions, the potential for an escalating economic conflict remains high. Russia's message to the West is clear. Any attempts to seize Russian assets will be met with equally severe countermeasures, including the targeting of private investors' holdings and properties. As the conflict over frozen assets continues to escalate, it underscores the importance of Russia's ongoing efforts to reduce reliance on the US dollar. The drive toward de-dollarization has become a crucial aspect of Russia's strategy to mitigate vulnerabilities exposed by Western sanctions. By diversifying away from dollar-denominated assets and building alternative financial mechanisms, Russia aims to shield its economy from future economic pressures and enhance its financial sovereignty in an increasingly polarized global economy. The importance of de-dollarization for Russia cannot be overstated. The dominance of the US dollar in international trade and finance has long been a vulnerability for countries like Russia that find themselves at odds with Western powers. By relying on the dollar, these countries expose themselves to the risk of sanctions and financial isolation. The US has used the dollar's status as the global reserve currency to enforce economic measures that can cripple adversaries, as seen in the current situation with Russia. In response, Russia is taking strategic steps to reduce its dependence on the dollar and shift toward a more diversified and resilient financial framework. A key component of Russia's de-dollarization strategy is its increased economic cooperation with China. The two countries have significantly expanded their use of national currencies in bilateral trade, particularly the RMB and the ruble. Today, nearly 90% of Russia-China trade is settled in currencies other than the US dollar. This shift not only strengthens the financial ties between Moscow and Beijing, but also diminishes the influence of the dollar in regional trade, creating a parallel financial ecosystem that is less susceptible to Western sanctions. This growing use of alternative currencies is a crucial step toward undermining the dollar's dominance in international transactions. Moreover, Russia has been actively building its gold reserves as a hedge against the dollar and as a means to stabilize its economy amidst global uncertainties. Gold, unlike fiat currencies, is not subject to the control of any one country, making it an attractive asset for nations seeking to safeguard their financial independence. By bolstering its gold reserves, Russia is positioning itself to withstand potential financial shocks and reduce its reliance on Western-dominated financial systems. This move aligns with a broader trend among BRICS countries, which are collectively looking to establish a more balanced and multipolar economic order. The push for de-dollarization also has significant geopolitical implications. As Russia, along with other countries, moves away from the dollar, it challenges the US's ability to unilaterally impose its will through economic means. This shift could accelerate the emergence of a multi-currency world order, where power is more evenly distributed and no single currency holds overwhelming influence. Such a transition would not only provide countries like Russia with greater economic autonomy, but also potentially lead to a more stable and equitable global financial system. The economic war is far from over, and the stakes are growing. With Russia actively developing financial ties with China, using the RMB and ruble to settle trades, and pushing for de-dollarization. The landscape of international finance is shifting. As cracks form in the global reliance on the US dollar, the push towards a multi-currency world order may accelerate, challenging the dominance of the dollar and reshaping global economic power structures.